From what I can find, the beginning of this trend started with John Kellogg, who first tried to entice kids to eat cornflakes with the offer of a free book, the funny Jungle Land Moving Pictures book. This was back in the early 1900s. Fun note, people say that cornflakes were invented to curb masturbation. Not entirely true. It was promoted as a part of a healthy diet which would reduce the urge to frost your flakes, but not the cure itself.
The man also believed in eugenics and yogurt enemas, so I mean, to be quite frank, you can just take everything that he says with a grain of salt. Please don't tell anyone how I live, and please like and subscribe.
Now, in order to redeem this prize, kids had to mail in proofs of purchase from the box itself, and then they had to wait for it to be mailed back to them. Now, because kids have no chill, they started putting the prize directly on or in the box. Not to be outdone, General Mills started offering its own premium incentives in the 1930s, sticking 12 different Skippy cards into boxes of Wheaties and encouraging kids to catch them all. The cards themselves were based on a popular comic strip from the 1930s simply titled Skippy, which focused on a young 5th grader and his hijinks in an unnamed city. Other brands quickly followed suit, thus starting one of the oldest traditions in children's toys, gambling. Fast forward to 1974, and cereal box toys were deemed so successful at hooking kids and turning a sugary snack into sugary smack that the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, considered banning all TV advertising of the premiums. Then FTC Chairman Louis A. Ingman then said that advertising the toys to children would, quote, exploit their known anxieties or capitalize on their propensity to confuse reality and fantasy, unquote.
Now, you also have to remember that this is a few years before the great satanic panic of, the 60s and 70s, so really, I think that these people were just kind of workshopping a couple things and just trying to see what stuck.
In 1988, there was a recall of some 30 million flutes and binoculars distributed in boxes of Kellogg's cereal after they were deemed a choking hazard. The flutes and the binoculars themselves all had loose pieces which you would have to assemble together, so for kids who weren't paying attention, it was very possible that they could end up ingesting a lens. Now, there were no known reports of any children dying or any other incidents themselves, but it was still something that obviously think of the children pearl clutching. That major embarrassment did result in most manufacturers shifting the toy placement, with most being placed in between the bag and the box lining starting in the 1990s. But it didn't shut down the toy factory for good. Semi-related side story, Kellogg, yes again, hit trouble when it packaged a Spider-Man themed wristwatch with Rice Krispies in 2004. This time it wasn't the prize itself that got Kellogg in trouble, but it was the battery of the watch itself, which was made out of mercury, which caused a whole lot of protests from environmental groups, state legislators, and parents in the fact that they straight up put mercury, even though it was individually packaged, they put mercury in a children's cereal. No healthy breakfast begins with mercury, quipped Connecticut Attorney General Richard Blumenthal in a letter to the food giant. Kellogg removed the product from shelves and promised never to use mercury batteries again, which, okay. I didn't know that was that hard to, not do. But also during the 1990s began the proliferation of home computers and online games. And one thing that these manufacturers found out is that it was far cheaper to pay a small studio to just throw some games together or to pay a licensing fee than it would be to pay to have all these little plastic toys produced and basically just end up in a landfill. From the research that I've done, it seems like most food marketers spend about a quarter to a third of their budget just on advertising alone. Most of this money is spent towards advertising costs for ad spots on television and online. But as I stated earlier, the initial cost and investment to do something like a computer game is a much better investment and return of investment than it would be for something that could potentially land you in a lawsuit due to choking hazards. In the corporate world, these types of games are called advergames, interactive, usually online or online adjacent games incorporating brand messages. In other words, cereal makers still want kids to play, but they want them to do it in a digital space where they will be hit up with more advertising, which in hindsight might explain why so many brands were so quick to jump on the whole metaverse hype train from a while ago. But now that we've gone through cereal history, let's start talking about the main reason that we're here, those sweet, sweet hits of nostalgia. So according to website mobygames.com, Disney's Activity Center Aladdin was technically the first video game, or I guess PC video game, that was released for a cereal box. Actually, now that I think about it, it's very surprising, and it honestly makes complete sense that Disney was pretty much the first IP to jump on this train, figuring out digital ways to indoctrinate us and our children. Since Disney in the 90s was embracing its golden age and was trying to really think forward in things like technology and how it is used to tell stories, much like the original ethos of Walt Disney, that and also, busting unions, but we're not here for that. Anyways, I would describe this type of game as like something that you would basically just rip straight from a kid's menu, from like Applebee's or something like that. You have a lot of very basic games like word search, matching, coloring, and you can also watch very low quality clips from the Aladdin movie itself right on your computer screen, which is a very novel idea, isn't it? And also, if you are really curious, you can actually play an emulated version of the game on the Internet Archive itself, just like an old Flash game. It's actually really cool. The Disney Activity Center series itself became a staple in many young children's daycare centers growing up. The next game that was released in cereal boxes was also Disney, with Timon and Pumbaa's Jungle Games. And this game was more along the lines of just 5 different mini games. You have Hippo Hop, Jungle Pinball, Sling Shooter, Bug Drop, and Burper. And I mean, just by looking at them, you can kind of get the gist and pick up what they're throwing down. Up next, we have digital board games. For some, mainly your parents or your grandparents, this might be the first introduction to video games, or more specifically, PC games. Monopoly, Clue, Yahtzee, Boggle, Candyland, Operation, Sorry, and Life all came out between 1995 through 1998 with digital facsimile. Now, if you're like me, these next set of games, despite the fact that I'm not really into like point and click adventure games, these are probably some of easily my favorite games to come out of cereal boxes. I would actually kind of dub these as educational adventure games because of the things that they taught and the themes of some of these games. I'm talking about the holy trinity of Pajama Sam, Freddy Fish, and Spy Fox, and their best friend, Carmen Sandiego. These games found a really messed up way to teach you useful information and real world stuff through the guise of video gaming. I personally would almost call them little microcosm Minecrafts of their generation. Not in terms of popularity, though Carmen Sandiego is still making moves today, but in terms of the fact that these games, like I said, they taught you real world information. I actually learned quite a bit about minerals and gems and rocks and sedentary earth, things like that. I learned a lot of that just messing around in Minecraft. So what did we end up learning from these edutainment adventure games? Well, let's see here. We learned geography with Carmen Sandiego. We learned about phonics, numbers, and nutrition with Pajama Sam and Freddy Fish. And we also learned about upping your Riz game with Spy Fox and whatever was going on with those cows.
The idea of eating dry breakfast cereal is pretty hard to swallow.
Yes, it is. Here's the only clue we have.
Feta cheese. A low grade, too.
Also, if they ever decide to reboot Spy Fox for any reason, they need to find a way to do a crossover with Sly Cooper. That would be sick. A spy versus thief narrative in the vein of like Zootopia, where it's like a bunch of animals and like an animal. Minus the propaganda though, just none of that. I think this could make an absolutely amazing experience. Maybe some asymmetrical Assassin's Creed type of multiplayer. Yeah. Well, subscribe for more, really good game ideas that will never happen.
You got an entire game, you got hundreds of hours potentially of entertainment, and you got all that for like, what, $5? And, there's a good chance your parents paid for it too. How could life get much better than that at that point?
Like, look at this list right here. Roller Coaster Tycoon 1 and 2. Age of Empires 1. Backyard Baseball and Backyard Basketball 2004. SpongeBob SquarePants, Operation Krabby Patty, and Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. These are the games that most people think of when they think about cereal box games, and Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. I call these games the Inquisitors. No one expected them. Parents were forced to partake, and children were forever converted. These were the games that childhoods were built on. They introduced a whole generation to gaming who wouldn't have had access to these types of games otherwise. Most of these games I don't even have to elaborate on because they are so ingrained into our nostalgia and the nostalgia culture in which we force ourselves to live in. And Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. Also, this is a great time to remind everyone that gaming preservation is ultimately very important, and this is why we need to be okay with things like emulation and ROMs and ISOs and all the fun stuff that comes with emulation and preservation of gaming and software. If you are a fan of myhouse.wads, then this is the game for you. Consider this your MyBreakfast.yums. That's right, yeah, I'm talking about Chex Quest, baby. Let's go. So the game was originally developed by Digital Cafe and was released back in 1996. The game is a literal total conversion of Ultimate Doom. It actually went on to win both a Golden Reggie Award for promotional achievement and the Silver Effie Award for advertising effectiveness. The game's sequel, Chex Quest 2, was released for free, but this time instead of having to buy a box of cereal for it, they just released it for free online. Not even doing like a CD key or some sort of serial key in exchange for it, so good on them for doing that. So the game was produced by a small team of developers on a budget of around $500,000. Chex Quest began life as a brainchild of a promotional agency that was hired to reinvigorate the Chex cereal brand. The original game concept was imagined as a non-violent CD-ROM computer game that would be released with Rice Chex, Wheat Chex, the whole Chex cereal line. And they wanted to basically make Chex the cereal really, really cool and edgy to kids, but also still safe for parents. The game itself, in terms of value, they wanted to try to aim for something that would be in the 30 to 35 range, which I feel like for the 90s, I mean, that'd be about AA, maybe a AAA game. I don't know. My parents bought me my games in the 90s. The genius thing about Chex Quest, at least in terms of a corporate standpoint, is the fact that they were able to save a ton of money on basically just doing a one-to-one conversion of the game. The game engine had already been created, bulk of the assets were created, that all they had to do was just change the sprites, mechanics, hell, even maps and stuff like that. That's all already been done. So all they had to do was just change it, maybe change up the music, and you're good to go. So the people making this game that were, paying for the development and all that, they actually contacted id Software, and they were given a cheap license for the Doom engine itself. It was completely considered obsolete because they had recently released Quake, and so from there they were able to just basically they hired two men, Charles Jacoby and Scott Hallman, both who have previously modded Doom levels in the past and kind of made their name in that scene. They hired both of these guys to head the development of this Chex Quest game, and so they just modded it into a PG version of Doom. And the game itself had no problem, poking fun of that fact. So instead of fascists and hell demons, which are basically the same thing, you're obliterating little goo alien creatures called Flemoids with a ranged taser and an electrified spoon. So instead of rip and tear, I guess we have scoop and zorch. Take it for what you will. For example, we had the bloodied bodies and twitching torsos from Doom, and they became the goo-covered cereal pieces and the cereal victims that were trying to, get themselves free from the Flemoid menace. Something I think is actually really, really clever, that in lieu of health and your character, dying because they ran out of health, it actually represents Chex Warrior's ability to move. So, as he gets covered with more goo, his little space marine outfit or whatever becomes harder to move around in as it becomes all caked and coated and crusty. And so when your quote-unquote health bar goes down to 0, that represents you being so covered in slime that you can't move. That's adorable, and that's pretty genius. And in order to save even more time and money, these guys would build the levels and stuff using tools that were already pretty prevalent within the modding community. So they would make levels using Doom Builder, which was at the time a very well-known level creation tool. And for things like sound effects and all that, they would just make weird noises and mess around in the sound booth and record those and basically just pitch alter that, and there you go, there's your Flemoids. Originally, the Zorch weapons were supposed to neutralize Flemoids with nutritional foods like bananas, milks, and strawberries in the but the higher ups who had to give the final approval upstairs, they were afraid that it would give the image and encourage the practice of food fighting. So they changed it so that the Zorcher shot out a pink light and quote-unquote sent back the Flemoids, making them vanish back to, I guess, whatever hell dimension, fascist hellhole they came from. Also, two neat little behind-the-scenes facts. Early designs for the Chex Warrior themselves also had the head and the body all as one giant piece, but they changed it because they didn't want it to be compared to the M&M animated creatures or characters. The last thing that I also wanted to say is that the Flemoids themselves were supposed to be yellow, but they ended up changing it to green because apparently there are limitations within the original Doom color palette that they couldn't do bright, sunny colors like that. If you want to check out the palette swaps between Chex Quest and Doom, I highly recommend checking out the Chex Quest wiki on Fandom. They have a great page that shows the different Flemoids across the games, actually all 3 Chex Quest games, and they even show you the original enemies that they were swaps for. My personal favorite is the final boss of Chex Quest 2. I'm talking about the Flemodius Maximus, Big Daddy Flemody, Maxi. Yeah, he's basically just a hunky buff snot pile thing. And he kind of reminds me of The Rock for some reason. I don't know why. So if you really want to check out the game, I would just recommend going to ChexQuest3.com and downloading that game. It includes the first 2 games as well. And I mean, they're each only 5 levels like Doom, or 5 episodes, whatever you want to call it. So you can get through it in like an afternoon. I would probably say don't bother with Chex Quest HD. From everything I've seen, it's very mid, so don't waste your time. And also, with Chex Quest 3, yo, they got a modding scene too. And you know that I love my modding scenes. So giving the mod DB page a quick glance, I mean, we have updated textures with higher resolutions, visor HUD, ooh, somebody has added blood and gore back into the game as well. And there are even, I guess for lack of a better phrase, there are even expansion packs. So we have new maps, new quest. Also, for those of you that need more of the Chex Quest lore, there is even a fan-made expansion called Chaos on Flemoid Prime, which actually explores the Flemoid direction. Wait.
Okay, so I meant Dimension in that, but I actually just realized I never went into the surprisingly in-depth, not deep, but just surprisingly deeper than expected lore for Chex Quest and the Chex Quest games. It's generic as hell, but it's still kind of fun. So let's go ahead and get into it. Well, young one, come sit next to Daddy. No, come sit next to me, and I'll come regale you a tale of cereal and goop.
The Chex Quest story begins with an emergency meeting with the members of the Intergalactic Federation of Cereals. In this meeting, it has been disclosed that a volcano on the planet of Bazoik has exploded. This planet is a peaceful mining planet known for its quality nutritional products. You know, oranges and other types of fruit that I can't think of right now. The Chex Squadron got fragments of this explosion and discovered that there were strange slimy larvae of another, I guess, trans-dimensional creature on top of it. And when this creature was exposed to nutritional substances, these larvae would abruptly grow into huge slimy creatures that had the capacity to launch their slime onto others, using this as a weapon in various ways in various orifices of their bodies. Don't think about that much more. Even more disturbing, communications with Bazoik were interrupted when this volcano erupted, and the Federation cannot contact anyone. But luckily, the Federation scientists have found a way to counter this threat. Although regular weapons do not infect these slimy invaders, the scientists have modified the Zorchers, the main weapon of the Federation, to effect a transportation of any object into another dimension. Which one, I don't know, but another one. So with this new mission, the Federation believes that it can actually take down this threat, but they need the help of a willing volunteer, and luckily they have just the person. Master Chex Warrior of the Chex Squadron is here to help. Using his new weapons, he faces the invaders. Will he succeed? Yes. Because this is a children's game and free cereal. The cereal's not free, the game is free, you gotta pay for the cereal. And in Chex Quest 2, Flemoids Take Chextropolis. This was a game that you can only get online. It came out a year after the original Chex Quest. But in Chex Quest 2, Flemoids Take Chextropolis, it starts with Master Chex returning to his home planet and landing in the city of Chex City. Okay, no, that's right. So yeah, it's basically like the ending of Halo 2, except more fulfilling and doesn't leave you mad. And in Chex Quest 3, which is the unofficial sequel to the Chex Quest franchise, you fight your way towards the Flemoid mothership and finally take back Earth. I mean, take back Chexington. I mean, take back Chextropolis. I mean, take back Chex City. So, in an attempt to try to wrap this up and rein myself in here, why did this all stop? I mean, the most obvious answer is just technology, but I think that at the same time, the change has more to do with kids themselves and what entertains them. My kids, especially, and you know, kids about a generation or so younger than me, they're raised in an era of smart toys and gaming consoles, and I mean, today's stuff that's just a hunk of plastic that'll fall apart in a day or two. I mean, they may want that, but they don't want that. I mean, take any young child to the dollar store, give them a couple of cheap little toys and see how long they really last. So yeah, it makes 100% sense of giving them 500 Robux and an exclusive like Roblox hat if they buy some cereal in lieu of giving them a Roblox little toy figurine. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially in the fact that you can probably earn some sort of kickback or royalties for each redemption that is made. Like in my past jobs, I've set up deals like this. This is how it works. Like, think about it. We have, XP boosts for Call of Duty and Halo that are included with energy drink prices. We have Diablo 4 with its beta with the purchase of a double down sandwich from KFC, which would pretty much already kill you and send you to hell. So why would you give Blizzard more money in that fact? But also, I mean, there's also weird ones like Sonic and Hooters. I didn't want to look any more into that because that's all I need to hear is, gotta go fast on them wings. And there's also the ones where you can get like an Xbox or a PlayStation from Taco Bell just by getting a freaking $5 lunch thing and putting in a code. Which I guess that's a very adult way of giving that same type of feeling, isn't it? But I mean, with everything I just said, it doesn't need to come back. We already have a dozen services that give out free games of varying qualities. Like most things from the 90s and the early 2000s, the nostalgia lies in the idea that these games were equalizers in terms of video game accessibility for various income levels and just, various people that wouldn't normally have access to gaming otherwise. And the fact that they caused a buzz within most people's personal communities and their own little bubbles, you gotta remember that this was just as the internet was starting to take off. So the only online communities that existed were basically extremely niche forums and IRC channels dedicated to nerd stuff, so you already had to be kind of older to know how to get to all that. These new games became accessible to you and all your peers around the same time, so they were these little zeitgeist moments with smaller, not online communities. I think the only way that these types of promos could really make a big comeback is if you were able to get a huge launch day title like Tears of the Kingdom included with the purchase of a cereal box. I know that they do that with like movie tickets and stuff like that, but once again, I think there's also a level of like tangibility into it, knowing that you hold in your hand something that you got for far less than it is worth. And I think also it worked well for these lower fidelity but higher quality games because of the fact that you didn't have to worry about everyone's PC specs. You didn't have to worry about how the game was going to run. It was a very, very low quality, essentially glorified Flash game. It was going to run on pretty much everyone's computers. So in an all-digital world where we are relegated to serial and QR codes over the tactile feeling of feeling an entire digital world in the palm of your hand, all of it contained in a shiny piece of plastic, it's almost akin to a technological relic disguised as magic. But now we can get free games all day, every day on our phone and from the cloud, so it's not magic, it's just sufficiently advanced technology.
Alright, if you made it this far, first off, thank you. I'm going to make this really quick because you've already been spending quite a bit of time here. I really didn't expect this video to be as long as it was. I just wanted to make a thing about cereal box games, and I started doing more research, and I realized that there aren't really like cereal box promotions anymore. But I went to Walmart earlier today and I walked through the whole shelf just to double check. The only thing I saw were Minecraft coins. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to call the trend of cereal box prices dead. I'd really love to know what you guys think. Let me know, leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, all the stuff. I think my next video is going to be a Wendigoon style video, so if that sounds something that's right up your alley, then yeah, stick around. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I've already actually started working on it a while ago, so hopefully it'll be sooner rather than later. So yeah, I want to get this last part in, I want to get this video up so I can start working on the next video. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Oh, wait, I'll do that next time. Bye.